Happy today. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com. This is Disconnect to Connect One-Word Conversations. One-Word Conversations is a self-discovery, relationship-building conversation designed to invite you to look at your language to see how you connect or disconnect, mainly through one word. Many times words don't just come with definitions. They come with stories and expectations and feelings, and you'll find yourself in disconnection when you've gotten all the lovely words that you can think of, and you still find yourself at that place. Well, I invite you to have a one-word conversation. Because if you're willing to have that one-word conversation, then you can learn more about yourself, the person that you're speaking to, and just maybe you might be able to build onto that relationship. One More Conversation is brought to you by IamWilliamBrown.com, a place to help you be yourself and live your life. One way that I spotlight what's available at the I Am William Brown store is our U cards. Our U cards are a part of the Beyond the Shell series. The two children's books that Finding You Beyond What Protects You and The Journey to Stay You. So the cards that I picked to set the intention for this conversation is I am curious, you are full of joy, and be you, do you, for you. Now, this is the moment where I invite you to like, share, comment, ask questions, do all those things to let me know that you are also a part of this conversation. So this is one of those shows where I have the guest who has dared to get their word live, on air. So as I do, I will invite my guest in so we can have a conversation. Good morning.
Good morning, William.
This is the moment where I invite my guests to introduce themselves however it feels comfortable to them.
Okay. Well, my name is Geoff Laughton. I am a professional relationship coach and men's coach for helping men live more authentic and aligned lives. And I'm in the Boulder, Colorado area. I've been doing this kind of work for 26 years. Also an author of 2 best-selling books and co-author of 3 other ones. And in addition to all that, a gray-haired veteran of many years on the planet, husband of 39 years now, and a dad and a grandfather, and an ever-curious being.
Wow.
Including, what on earth are you going to surprise me?
But you have you have taken the challenge. So yeah, let's just get to it. So the word today that I want to see how it lands for you is important. So how does the word important land for you?
First thought is that in many ways that word has been the bane of my existence.
I got that.
Probably most of my sentient, cognitively aware life, so maybe late childhood up to today. And why I say that is because, second thought, when you said the word, is that the definition of that word is so, for me, is so completely relative. And my experience of the human mind and the human ego is control is one of the primary agendas. And And if you're going to figure out what you want to control, you have to know what's most important.
Right.
What's most important to control. And that ends up with me, and I think for most people, trying to sort that out is actually done
Right.
through the lens and through whatever the agenda of my ego is. So that pretty much means I'm trying to gauge how to manage my life with the fox guarding the hen house, giving me the directive.
Oh boy, that I totally get that. I'm the same way with important. It is more about, for me, it's not what I think is important, what the people around me think is important, right? Is that balancing act. And so
Yeah.
when you said the fox in the hen house, I was like, oh, I totally get it. It's like, because it's like, this is important to me.
Right.
But is it really, right?
Right. Well, and I think, the other thing that gets tricky when you're trying to figure that out, when I try and figure that out for me, is it important to my ego or, my mental reality?
Right.
Is it important to my emotional reality?
Right.
Or is it important to my spiritual pursuits? And oftentimes the mind and emotions are the ones that really determine the importance.
Right.
Barring times where, if your house is on fire or your foot's stuck in a railroad tie and there's a train coming, you better get the hell out of there.
Right.
That's important.
Right.
That's absolutely important. But figuring out the relative importances, if there's such a word,
Right.
that gets to be tricky. And I'm very aware as we're talking that how that gets parsed out
Right.
is different in different periods of life.
Right.
Because there were a lot of things that were important to me 40 years ago
Right.
that I just don't care about
Right.
anymore.
Right. It's I can remember the difference between who said it was important, right? So from
Right.
when my mom would say it was important, when a boss would say it was important, when my wife would say it was important, how my response to that. And it's really interesting that I really want to be present, be available, be be a person that can help out when something's important needs to be taken care of. But there have been so many times where somebody's important was like, really? Is this what we're doing? is this what you got me like on alert for? I mean, you're like wasting my time, but you want to honor that, but then it's that balancing act that happens for me.
Well, and as you were sharing that, what occurred to me is that, two back-to-back thoughts. The first one was, is important as a word synonymous with priority? And then the second thought was, no, I don't think so, but I do think that because my mind can say 5 things are really important today.
Right.
And that's before my wife maybe tells me that there's something important that has to happen, or, our son might call and say, Dad, this is really important. How I sift what's really important is what are my priorities.
Right.
You
Wow.
know, work, my wife,
Right.
my kid, and my kid's 34 years old. So
Right. But it's right. I
it's
got
still
some in
my
the
son.
20s. Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's still right. That you're hearing it from there and from those priorities. I'm really I'm really trying to, I guess, again, really stay present if my priorities, it's because I think it's what you were pointing to is the relationship, right? It's your relationship to the person who has something and important. There's sometimes within, not to talk about politics or anything like that, but there was a lot of things in the news about this is the most important election of our lifetime. It's like, really? I mean, it's like I've heard that before and I haven't. And it is that type of thing that I don't know if that's grandiose or hyperbolic or or whatever, but it is something. Sometimes it's designed, when it's used, it feels like it's designed to distract or to get our attention, to control. I think you mentioned before,
Right.
us to, I guess, to switch our priorities, to kind of, and so, like I said, how you have the listening, how I have the listening to that language from people, the important language is my relationship. If I don't think that there is, I don't know, a strong relationship, or if I trust their, what they say,
Mhm.
they can use important all they want, and it's not going to move a needle.
Exactly. That's a really good point. Um, and there's relationship, and then there's relating.
Hmm.
So, if I have conflicting important things to deal with,
Hmm.
yes, definitely my relationship with whatever or whoever the source of important is,
Right.
it's almost like that's the first gate to get through.
Right.
And then if the thing or the person gets through that first gate, then how much farther they get when depends on how I relate to what they're asking me to do, or what needs to be done. And I
Right.
may relate to that very differently than they do.
Hmm.
What my wife says is really important. What I notice, if it's important to her,
Hmm.
like that's just unequivocally clear,
Right.
then for me it's a no-brainer. I'm going to
Got it.
do what I've got to do to take care of that. Not from any kind of power thing, but I love my wife,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
she knows me really, really well, and she knows not to tell me X is important
Right.
unless it really is.
Right. Hmm.
So that I relate to her like my top priority besides my own well-being.
Right.
So
Hmm.
that's going to get it. But if she says, well, this is important in a global way,
Right.
or, it's going to be important for you to dot, dot, dot,
Right.
there's going to be another layer of, well, is it important to me? Is this
Got it.
a priority for me? Or
Right.
is this her opinion?
Right.
And maybe it's not an opinion I share.
Hmm.
And then, I just hope that if it's an opinion I don't share, that I, am able to elegantly say, I don't agree, and
Right.
I'll get to that later.
Hey, look, you got 39 years. I got 30 years. So there is some finesse in in what you just
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
here's the other thing that's coming up for me, and I really got what you were saying there, is that sometimes I make judgments with people that with their actions and when they say that's important. Or, you know what I mean? It's like sometimes someone can say something is important to them, but their actions show something totally different. There's not an urgency, or there there's not a care. There's just there's a disconnect, and I'm is important does important show up more in the actions? Is that what something else has to come with it, versus just, oh, this is important. There has to, and so I guess that's the question that I'm
Mhm.
asking. Is that because sometimes, look, my judgments are sometimes wrong, and my wife will tell me, right, you're wrong. This is this is important. But yeah, how does our action show up with how important lands?
That's a great question. And the first thing, as maybe a preface to my answer, is that important is also going to be determined. Another thing that determines importance to you or me is what our values are.
Got it.
And in my line of work, I've done an exercise with clients to determine what their core values are as a human being, and also what their relationship values are. And the way the brain organizes itself includes from attitudes and beliefs and values.
Got it.
Those are three. I think there's one or two other filters, but in the thousands of inputs that our brain gets per second, we couldn't possibly even recognize them all. So if you just imagine this big torrent of input always coming into our brain, and you got to get it down to a manageable chunk, attitudes, beliefs, and values are one of the core filtration systems that the brain uses to decide.
Right.
And so, but beliefs and attitudes are often driven by values. So when I work with somebody to try to get clear what their key values are, it's almost inevitable that every time someone will say health, family, equity,
Right.
and love. Great. But they're 150 pounds overweight. They work 70 hours a week. They haven't talked to anybody they love that didn't speak to them first.
Right.
For weeks. And they talk about the importance of equity while they live in their $5 million home that they haven't gone out of in the last several months. Right. And they don't even know where a food bank or a Goodwill store is.
Right.
So what that generally then indicates is the values that they've listed are not their values. They're the ones that their ego says, oh, these will sound good. Or right. I really want, I want to believe that I have these values. Right. So to your point, William, our actions tell anybody who's paying close attention that our values are actually not what we say they are, but they're, I value sloth, and I value my addictions, and I value money more than I value any of those other things, or what have you. It's different for everybody, but that's a key thing that I think really tells you a lot. And the other part about action is even if I'm saying something that is truly authentically aligned with what's most important to me,
Right.
if we both have been married long enough that I would hope both of us have learned that if we tell our partners or our kids, I will do X by tomorrow.
Right.
And tomorrow comes and
Right.
X never does. Well, that conveys a message of what is not important.
Right.
Which is our integrity and our word.
Right. Yeah, there was. I have adult children also, and it was we were together, having a dinner or something, or just family and just kind of talking, and my son said, "Oh yeah, I remember when we were growing up, and when Dad would say, 'I'll think about it,' I knew that was no." Right.
Right.
And it was like it hurt my heart because I didn't have access to tell them why, because most of the times he was absolutely right. I didn't know how to say no at the time, so I was like, I'll think about it. But I would just never get back to him, right? So it's like, okay, so that means no, type of thing. And so it was really, I was training them that what they wanted to do, one, wasn't important or wasn't something that I felt that they needed to be doing. And it wasn't important enough for me to come back and tell them exactly what I was thinking about or what the decision was. And that was very difficult. And because there was a number of areas in my life where, I would say that this is important, that this is, I'm going to give this, great thought and all that. And my actions didn't, show that at all. And I really, the reason why this question, this word came up to unpack for myself and see how it's showing up for you, is that I want to get to a place where when I say it, when I say important and when I hear important, I not only just hear the words, but I go through the steps that you were saying, the relationships, the actions, all of that very quickly, so I can be engaged or not, to buy into to this, right? Or or not, and because even though it may not be important to me, it's important to them on some level. And because there are some things that I think that are important, or maybe it's the ego, because I think other people think I think it should be important, right? It's like, okay, this is what you think should be important, so that's what I should, and it's just like that little game that I'm playing with myself. And it's not connected to my values at all. It's not connecting to anything that I want. And I think it feels like many people live there than really of a authentic, place of, this is what's important to me. This is what I want. And this is the actions that I'm going to put behind it.
Well, that brings up another interesting point, that if you haven't used this word yet, it could be a good one down the road, which is one that you used a bit ago, which is present or presence. Because if you think about it, you just laid out an even more kind of complex web. Because there's what do I know? There's what do they think or need or want, and how much do I care about that?
Right.
And then you added in another dimension of how's this going to play?
Right. Right.
So how much am I going to determine my priorities and choices that are important? if I also have to add that additional filter of what will they, the
Right.
proverbial they, think.
Right.
One of my greatest aspirations before I die is that I actually have more than a week of consecutive days where I truly don't care what anyone thinks about me.
Wow.
Because that is the ultimate freedom that any human can have. And
Wow.
I'm not, espousing a nihilistic, screw them.
Right.
I'm just really talking about my identity and my moral and inner compass
Right.
is solely determined by my soul and how I connect to it,
Right.
and not by the court of popular opinion, whether they're people really, really close to me or just people who don't know me from Adam. But in, social media worlds these days, you can say something and you get canceled.
Right.
So that's a whole nother
Right.
point.
Right. That's a whole nother conversation there. In 2019, what seems like at least 10 years ago, but it just feels that way.
Yeah.
The big lesson that I got from that year is what you were speaking to, of caring about myself a little bit more than caring about other people. And it's like I didn't want to care about people less. I just wanted to care about myself and my relationship to myself a little bit more, because
Mhm.
I saw many times where someone else's important was more important than my important. And there was a lot of missing from my life, and dare I say, resentment, right? That I was creating, right? It wasn't them, it wasn't my wife, it wasn't my kids, it wasn't anybody else. It was I chose to care about them and
Right.
make them more important than I made me important.
Right.
And so it's that balancing that. It's like, even if it's just a little bit more, it's like, yeah, I care about you to the moon, but I get a little bit more, maybe an inch more than that. And if I am able to stay there for, a week or more, then I think that's when we can change, make the change and see the things that that we want to see. So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah. Yet another great point, because there's giving more to others, which, certainly every religious or spiritual tradition I know of, frequently talks about being of service.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know the way that I grew up and where my mind went with things that happened when I was growing up. I became somebody that would always put other people first.
Got it.
And what I didn't know until I got old enough and did enough work on myself was part of that was genuine caring and wanting to be helpful to people.
Right.
But I also realized that, well, I'm doing that to make myself important to them, which
Wow.
means when I need something, they'll do something for me.
Right. Wow.
And in fact, for men that are listening or watching this, one of the most powerful books I've ever read was a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Yes. I read that.
By Dr. Roger Glover.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was halfway through the first chapter, like the introduction, and I'm like, oh shit.
I know.
This is me. So I think, I think about it through the lens of another powerful word, which is resourced.
Mm.
We all need to be resourced. We need to eat to not starve to death.
Right.
And we need to feed our mind to stay alert and, maybe out of the home a few extra years.
Right.
And we need connection to keep our heart working. And
Right.
we need pleasure and joy and play and quiet time. All of those things that I just mentioned, I look at as things that source me, allow me to be resourced
Right.
so that I'm able to be resourceful to those that I'm serving, professionally
Right.
and personally and for myself. And
Mm.
that what you're saying, I really agree with 100%, that where I need to take some time to myself, if I'm choosing to use that time to get more resourced, calm down, less anxious, rebalanced, recalibrated,
Right.
I feel better.
Right.
And a better feeling me is a better resource for everybody that I'm helping out or
Right.
relating to. And
Right.
that's important.
Right. Absolutely. This feels like on so many levels an important conversation, right? And it's really um, my relationship to important really goes with my relationship to myself and other people, right?
Yeah.
And it's that, and the only way that I really can do that, and I think by you were saying, is that work, that inner work. That I'm a self-awareness coach, right? So I believe self-awareness is not the answer; it's a key.
Oh, yeah. It's the
Uh,
foundation to start.
right, right, and it's like, so there are many decisions and choices that come after we are aware, right? I notice, and this was a difficult thing for me. The more that I got aware of myself, the more that I realized how many things that I was saying no to.
Mm.
I thought I was, Mr. Nice Guy, yes, all that. There were so many things that I was saying no to, and most of them were to myself.
Ah.
And so I was denying myself, call it worthiness, calling what, trying to be relevant or important to other people, all of those things. And it was like, okay, what are we going to do now? How are we going to show up now that I'm aware of this? What are we going to do? And I think the more that we look at what's important, and like you said, it starts with our values. And most of the times our spoken values aren't really our values, right? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of us get to that place where where they are, because I would tell people, and I believe this to be true, but I know that I don't operate in this all the time because of a lot of things. My
Human.
core values are curiosity, independence, and compassion.
Mhm.
And so when I show up that way, when I am curious about something, and I'm curious about the people, and that's what these conversations, I'm curious about how things land for people. It works out for me. When I speak for myself and I really own where I am and what I'm feeling, what I'm not feeling, and how that it works out. When I have compassion for myself and others, it works out. But there are so many times somebody else's importance gets in the way of me living those values. And so really recognizing that it's important for me to honor those values so I can show up fully for people. And I think sometimes we do all this inner work, and then we put it on the side because somebody else's importance shows up. you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, as I've gotten older, I've come to believe that it has to start with me being as aware as I possibly can
Mm,
of, what is really non-negotiable needs that I have.
hmm
And I can choose to relegate those
Right.
or deprioritize them in a moment for something that lands as more important.
Right.
Like, you get a call that your kid's been in an accident or something. Um, but I think to start, my coach puts it a really good way. There's choosing things from external reference,
Right.
what they think, how this will look. Will this be advantageous to my business? Is this
Right.
going to get me laid tonight?
Right.
Whatever the
Right. Whatever.
external
Right.
references are, or they're internally sourced from
Mm,
my connection to my spirit, my intuition,
right.
my highest self. And I ain't perfect at it either. We're human.
Right.
But one of the races, as it were, is I want to more and more get better and more consistent at choosing from that internally sourced place that
Right.
then lets me know what do I need to do out there
Right.
accordingly.
Right.
And that so far anyway, that's been the best middle ground I've discovered to date
Right.
for kind of balancing, not being completely, um, not being a schmuck
Right.
and an
Yeah.
inconsiderate ass, but
Right.
genuinely, okay, how's this work and how I'm the ultimate one who gets to choose
Right.
how I'm going to do that balance.
Right. Wow.
Helps if we're present.
Right.
And if we're present, we're going to know whether it's internal or external that's making that initial call.
Right. Wow. I think we can talk about this for hours. However, I'm sure there's something important for us to do, or somebody's thinking of something important for us to do.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
um, is there anything that's come up in this conversation that you want to leave with everyone?
Um, yeah, I think the Shakespeare line "To thine own self be true"
Hmm.
is the most important tool, awareness and tool, to at least begin looking at how do I decide what's important and how I'm going to spend this moment or my time today,
Hmm.
or this month. And starting with be true to yourself. And we can BS ourselves till the cows come home.
Right.
So make sure you're really clear what your most accurate based on decades of experience, if you
Right.
have decades, like
Right.
we apparently do. Um, you know,
As many as you
how,
have, right?
yeah, is, what most consistently has proven to be the most accurate and authentic barometer,
Right. Got it.
and
Wow.
go with that as much as you can.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you, my friend. This has been great.
That
I
was fun.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, would love to say our goodbyes within the green room if you're able to do that, but this has
Yep.
been fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, important. There is, it feels like it's very simple, very easy, very something that you either know this is important or it's not. But many times there are so many things that can help us really determine and, you know, to our own self be true. William Shakespeare. So figure out what's true to you, your values, what you believe, what your relationship is. There's a lot of things there that will allow you to make the decision around important. We'd love to hear how this conversation is landing for you. You can reach out to me at imwilliambrown.com for a complimentary coaching session where I can help you be yourself and live your life. Because the world wants you, the world needs you, but the world isn't waiting for you. So go be you. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you tomorrow on One Word Conversations.